In this video, I'll be taking care of the rusted out areas of the floor pan and lower portions of the inner and outer firewall panels. In one of my previous videos, I showed the condition of the area of the floor behind the driver and passenger seats where the floor pan joins with the lower part of the firewall. Behind the seam sealer and tar mats, the metal has rusted away so much you can stick your fingers right through to the engine bay, basically. This means a section of the floor pan and the bottom few inches of both the inner and outer firewall need to be removed and replaced. For the floor pan, I bought a reproduction floor pan section, but for the firewall sections, I decided just to fabricate and fit in new metal. This is the bottom of the floor pan looking up into the cavity between the inner and outer firewall. Trying to figure out here what is solid and what isn't so I can plan how much I need to cut out. But the first thing I need to do before they start that is to remove the jack points since they overlap this corner of the floor pan. I've already removed the one on the other side when I did the longitudinal repair. That one couldn't be saved, but this one looks alright, so I'll clean it up and put it back on after the new floor is in. With that out of the way, I could start drilling out the spot welds holding the floor pan to the frame. And then make my cuts to detach the parts of the pan and lower few inches of the firewall I'll be replacing. Once I removed all the metal too rusty to save, I mocked up the floor repair panel and marked where the good metal ends. Before I made my cuts to the new piece, I added about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch to the line I traced, giving myself an overlap so I could weld it in place with plug welds. It fit reasonably well without any serious bending or hammering, so I moved on to cleaning up the inside of the gap between the inner and outer firewall since that'll be inaccessible after the floor panel is in. And then cleaned up the perimeter of the old metal I'll be welding to. I also decided to remove the end of this support rail to help with the fitment, and I'll tack that back on later. Then I added a coat of primer over everything before I fitted the floor pan on for good. But first I had to address the inside of the tunnel. With the floor and a chunk of the outer firewall off, I could see it was worse inside here than I thought it was at first. I figured the path of least resistance here was to cut along this bend from the bottom to be able to get at the rust inside. I had to be really delicate and not cut too deep, or I could risk nicking some of the electrical wiring or brake lines or heater cables you can see here. Instead of leaving this primered, I decided to paint it with this Rust-Oleum rust encapsulating paint. It isn't the best stuff I've used, but I've used it before and I found it to be pretty durable. Again, I used this handy strip of copper to protect everything on the inside of the tunnel from heat and sparks from the weld. After that was done, I was ready to finally put the replacement panel in. This gap here was a total oops. I cut too much of the old metal off that the new panel wouldn't cover. Fortunately, I had enough of the panel left over to make myself a patch. In doing this, I found that the curve in the aftermarket floor pan is a bit different than the original panel. I'd be left in a situation to deal with this weird gap regardless. I thought the best fix would be to angle this patch so it tapers off to the original curve. It's not pretty, but once it's all welded up, it could look alright. Then I started shaping the metal for the patches in the firewall. I found it easier to do the patches in the engine bay in short sections because of how little I had to fill in with metal. most complicated part of this was the area of the inner firewall around the parking brake cable tubes. A few deep curves that needed to be accounted for here. This is where a ball-peen hammer came in handy. It allowed me to pound the new metal directly onto the old metal to conform to the area I was patching. It wasn't easy, and I had to do a lot of little touch-ups before it fit just right. And then all of the inner firewall patches were in. Now, in order to reattach the seat hinge bracket in the exact spot to weld back in, I had to mock it up with the seat rail to make sure that the seat adjustment lever would fit properly in the catch. And then I used a square to make sure everything was square. Interestingly, but not incredibly surprising, the reproduction emergency brake cable guide needed to be trimmed quite a bit in order to not overlap with the seat hinge bracket. And then just for my peace of mind that everything would fit properly, I mocked it up with the emergency brake lever fitted to a reproduction mount and the seat rail again. I also needed to do that to find the exact spot on the firewall that this cable cover attaches to reattach the little bracket I removed at the very beginning of this segment. Getting to the last couple of things before I can consider the floor done, I removed the seat support rail, I'm not sure what this is called actually, from the section of the floor I cut out and tacked it back onto the new floor repair panel. And lastly, the jack points. I saved the driver's side and got a reproduction jack point for the passenger side. And that's it for this video. This one took a lot of work to put together, and all this work was actually done over a 10-month span. If you like this, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.